All right, welcome back to English 101. This is week 3. It's also called Rhetoric 1. So we'll talk a lot about rhetoric. And this is our rhetoric and writing lecture for this week. It's going to be a little heavier on grammar, which to me is more in line with the rhetoric and writing part of our class than the reading part. So we are going to be talking about some grammar stuff today, but also paragraph structure. And again, if you've been in my class before, you may see some familiar things and you may just decide to fast forward through, and you can even go back and look at your notes if you were in English 088 before, or if you ever took 101 with me and didn't finish it or something, you might have seen this before. So again, for those people, you may decide to fast forward a little bit. For everybody else, it may be a little bit longer video. It's probably more than 10 minutes to get through all this. But hopefully you'll bear with me because I think it's useful stuff. If you can write a really strong sentence on a regular basis, do that consistently, and the same with paragraph structure. I always tell students there's not really much you can't write because if you look at it, essentially all writing for college or really for anything is a collection of paragraphs. So if your sentences and paragraphs are strong, everything else can be figured out and you can build on that. And I can already see as essays are starting to come in that you already have skills in those areas. So again, this is just refining and looking at a couple of ways you can make improvements to both sentence and paragraph structure. So let's start out with the sentence part. If you have the Harbrace Essentials book, that's our main text for the class, you'll see that there are these pages on complete sentences. What is it that makes up a complete sentence? We're going to talk about that just quickly here. Pages 250 to 271. And then two of the most common errors, really three, I should say, but two types. Fragments are a kind of a sentence problem where you don't have enough information. Your sentence is missing something, and so that, it makes it confusing for the reader. Comma splices and run-ons, the same thing. Well, it's actually not the same thing. They're sentence errors. They're very similar, though. They're not exactly the same, but comma splices and run-ons kind of are part of the same problem, which is you have a lot to say, but you don't separate those ideas. So the ideas kind of run together. And to make it clear communication, you want to include punctuation, maybe a comma, maybe a period and a capital letter, whatever works in that situation. So we're going to look at how to correct these three types of sentence problems today. All right. So any time you're writing a sentence, again, this is a very much going back to basics here. You have to have a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. That's what I think. There will be a quiz question at some point, usually in most of my classes, where I ask you, what does a complete sentence have? What does it have to have? Some people will say it has to have punctuation. Well, that's also true. And a capital letter, yes. But what I'm really looking at is these three things. It has to have a subject, talking about something, a verb, something happened, or somebody thought something, there was, an action, a thought, something occurred, and then it has to have a complete thought. And if it doesn't have all those three things, it'll be probably a fragment. If it has too many of those things, maybe it has these three times, it could be a run-on. Well, not always, though. So here's a quick example. She goes to work. She's our subject. It's a pronoun. She goes. It's a verb. Tells us something about her. It's kind of a complete thought. We at least know, we don't know who she is, but if we knew her, we would know she does this. She goes to work. Now, you might notice here we added the word when. And right away, this just changes the whole dynamic of the sentence. And it takes it from a complete thought to an incomplete thought. So believe it or not, this is a longer sentence, got one extra word, but it's actually an incomplete and would be considered a fragment, whereas the first sentence is just a good, simple sentence. So again, we've got these three types of common sentence errors that come up all the time, and this is all coming right out of your Harbrace Essentials book. So if you want more information on this, the easiest thing, you can Google it, of course. One site I really like if you're trying to find more information is a place called the Purdue Owl. It has nothing to do with birds, but it stands for Online Writing Lab. And Purdue University down over in Indiana has one of the best online, just all kinds of information. It's almost a little too much, but again, if you went there and you search for run-on sentences on the Purdue Owl, you'd probably get all kinds of worksheets and handouts and things beyond what we have in our textbook. Just one resource that I think is really useful, the Purdue Owl. Again, that's at Purdue University, OWL, Online Writing Lab. So a run-on sentence is a sentence that basically you have two ideas and you just stick them together, but you don't have, speaking of ice cream, sorry, I went to Freddy's today. I don't know if anybody in the class is familiar with Freddy's in Cicero, but boy, they have good gelato. Sorry, just had to throw that in there. I do love ice cream. That's a true story. I love ice cream. I even make ice cream sometimes. So again, we've got two ideas. They're related, so you can see how you want to put them together. Now, a comma splice is just slightly better than a run-on because it does at least say, okay, there is two ideas. I'm going to at least mark that with a comma. But really, that's not the best fit, and it's also kind of considered an error. And grammar, the only thing that's important about grammar is that it can help you to be more clear with your ideas, and it makes it clearer for the reader. Because I don't know about you, but I always think I'm being clear, and then sometimes a student will ask a question. I'm like, oh, I wasn't being clear, and that happens all the time in writing. So the only thing that grammar is really good for, in my opinion, is just to make our writing clearer and easily understood. Here we have the last type over here, a fragment. It's an incomplete sentence. It's missing something. Maybe there's a verb missing, maybe a subject, maybe a complete thought. So these are the three types of sentence errors. If you can fix these, really, these are the things that come up in writing very commonly. So if you can fix these three types, you can really improve your writing. One of the first ways, you have to know how to fix them, but you have to identify them. So we're going to look at that, some examples, just to identify these in our own writing. And that's the goal, not so much to go out and correct anybody else's writing, but to be able to identify these in our own writing. Because to be honest, I write sentence fragments. I do all these grammar things all the time, but the difference, one difference is just that I've kind of learned how to correct them. Doesn't mean my writing is perfect, but it just means that I can fix it when it gets broken, which it gets broken regularly when I'm trying to write something difficult. So here's an example. So Sophia thought there was going to be a quiz. She wrote down all the information that was on the board. So again, we have a run-on sentence right at this pronoun she, if you can see that. We break into another idea, separate idea. It's related. Because it's related, there's a lot of different ways we might connect it. But one thing you could do is just make it two sentences. Right after quiz, you could put a period and then a capital S. Okay, we have two subjects, she and then Sophia. They're both subjects. We have verbs, wrote down, and she thought. Those are kind of actions or thoughts. And we have two complete thoughts. So putting a period after quiz and capital S would be fine. You could also put what's called a fanboy and a comma. Now, if you've not been in my class before, if you've forgotten, fanboy is a way that people remember what are called coordinating conjunctions. Conjunctions are words that connect, that we want to use to connect two sentences. So the fanboys is just a simple way to remember them. It's an acronym. So, an acronym is where you have a word that stands for something else, like Central Intelligence Agency, right? CIA, or NFL, National Football League, right? These are acronyms. Fanboys is the same. So it stands for, F stands for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and then the S stands for so. So each one of those is a word that you could use in this particular sentence. So if you look at it, and a comma, it always goes with a comma, fanboy and a comma. Here we have comma, so. Sophia thought there was going to be a quiz, comma, so. She wrote down all the information that was on the board. That's, to me, the best way to connect two related ideas is a comma, fanboy. It's not the only way. That's why we have three examples here, right? Two sentences is great, but you don't want to do two sentences every single time, because what happens is your writing becomes a little choppy, right? You just have a short sentence, short sentence, short sentence, and we don't speak that way generally, so we don't want to write that way either. So you want to mix it up if you can. Once in a while, yes. Use a comma, fanboy. Maybe the next sentence use a period and a capital letter. And this all depends too on the overall paper. But these are two options. The last option is probably my least favorite, just because I don't know. I just don't like semicolons that well, and I don't know what that is. It's something I'm going to have to look at maybe. But semicolons to me I would use them sparingly. Let's just say that. But they do work. If you have two complete ideas, you can connect them with a semicolon. You don't want to connect an incomplete to a complete sentence, or what we call an independent clause and a dependent, which we can talk about later. But for this, you have a complete sentence on its own, and you have another one these are two what we call independent clauses, complete sentences that can stand on their own, and the semicolon can work there too. But again, I wouldn't use it very often. It's like very hot pepper or something, You put a little bit in your recipe, maybe. That all depends on your taste, right? But it can overwhelm, right? If you have a certain kind of really strong pepper you're cooking with, it can overwhelm if you put too much, right? So you're trying to kind of just like add that, but you don't want too many. And that's, I know that's not a very exact thing. And another thing I often tell students is rhetoric is not math, right? It's a little more of an art than a science in a lot of ways. So, you just have to play around with that and see how it feels. But generally don't use a lot of semicolons. I would say that's just a general rule I have. Use them sparingly. And there's, usually you really want to make sure these two ideas are clearly related, where you definitely wouldn't want to use a semicolon. It really works good with closely related ideas like we have here. These are closely related, so it could work. So these are the three ways that I would recommend you correct a run-on. Same thing with a comma splice. You may just have the comma but not the fanboy, so you just want to add in one of these fanboys. And remember, the fanboys are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. All right, so this is some ways you can correct run-ons. I also want to look at how to correct a fragment. So the fragments are a little, and we're going to look at some examples in just a moment, but fragments are, to me, a little easier to correct as long as you can spot them and you know what they are. Because a fragment will usually be missing something, right? Is it missing a subject? Is it missing a verb? Pardon me, is it missing a complete thought? Once you figure that out, it's pretty easy because you just have to supply the missing part. Here we have an obvious fragment in blue. Decided to complete the course online. We don't know who decided. So really, this is a fragment. You need a subject. It doesn't have a subject, this sentence. Now you might say, oh, course is a subject. No, it's not. It's more of the object of the sentence. We need something doing the action or making this happen. So Estrella decided to complete, we add a name, we add a person. This one's missing a verb, but there is a verb, writing, right? Raul writing in his journal, but it's missing part of the verb. So this is a type of verb in this sentence. It needs a helping or a linking verb to kind of come in and fill in. So Raul writing in his journal, Raul was writing in his journal, is writing in his journal, something like that would improve this sentence a lot. So again, we're missing part of the verb in this one, even though there is a verb. This one's missing a complete thought. When Paulina opened Blackboard. So to me, if you have a period here, and there's not one, there should be, but there's not even punctuation, but we can connect this one. And so one of the best ways to fix a fragment, you can either add a subject, add a verb, or you can just connect it to another complete sentence, an actual complete sentence, because this is not. When Paulina opened Blackboard, we have a comma. She could attend class virtually. Now you might notice a moment ago I mentioned you want to use a fanboy and a comma. Well, that's only true if you have two independent clauses or two sentences that can stand on their own. This one can't stand on its own, when Paulina opened Blackboard. So you don't have to use a fanboy here. You can just connect it with a comma to this other complete sentence that has a subject, verb, and a complete thought. She could attend class virtually. So these are the three ways that you can fix a fragment. And let's look at a couple of examples. And what I would recommend, and if you've been in class before with me, you might have even seen these examples, so I apologize. But if not, or if you've just forgotten them, I'd recommend you take a moment as I go through each one of these and see how well you do in terms of choosing the correct one, the way to fix each sentence. You could just pause the video, go through it, and then see how you did. So we have a fragment, which means it's missing something. And I'll just tell you here, it's missing a verb. And the fragment part is in the red part. We have two sentences here, right? Alternative medical treatment may include hypnosis. And everybody probably knows hypnosis is when you put somebody sort of in a trance state. And that's a complete sentence. But the red part is not. It's a related idea. The placement of a patient into a sleep-like state. So you can kind of, if you just saw that sentence, it might look okay to you, but there's something missing. So let's look at what would be the best version of fixing this, A, B, or C. So alternative medical treatment may include hypnosis, comma, the placement of a patient into a sleep-like state. Alternative medical treatment may include hypnosis, semicolon, the placement of a patient into a sleep-like state. Alternative medical treatment may include hypnosis, period, capital T. In fact, we added a subject, didn't we? This technique places the patient into a sleep-like state. So again, if you want to pause the video and just decide is A, B, or C the best choice here, go ahead and do that now. And then when you come back, I will give you the answer, what I think would be best. All right, so hopefully you pause and look at that for a second. So the first one is fine. We have an independent clause. Alternative medical treatment may include hypnosis. In other words, an independent clause is its own sentence, a complete sentence all by itself. And remember, we said a comma can be used to connect a dependent clause, in other words, a fragment, an incomplete sentence. Think about those words independent and dependent. So independent clause is a group of words that can stand on its own. Dependent clause, I'm going to use those terms probably throughout the semester, so just want to clarify those. A dependent clause is a word that can not stand on its own. I mean, a group of words that cannot stand on its own. So this second part is a dependent clause. It's not a complete sentence. The first part is. So a comma works fine. You don't need the fanboy or anything. So letter A is a good choice. Letter B, alternative medical treatment may include hypnosis, and we use a semicolon. Now remember I said to use a semicolon to correct a sentence there. It's probably going to be used to correct a run-on sentence. It works good when you have two independent clauses, two ideas that can stand on their own. You put the semicolon in the middle. So I would say for B, not a good choice for this one. B is not a good choice. I wouldn't use a semicolon to tack on something. I would just use a comma like we did here. This works better. C, we put a period, we add a subject. So both of these are now independent clauses or complete sentence. So this is also good. So C is good, A is good. I wouldn't use B for this. All right, let's look at one more example here of a fragment. Derived from a word meaning nervous sleep. So here we have a fragment at the beginning. It's obviously a related idea to hypnotism, actually refers to a type of focused attention. The second part here is good, it's correct. The first part is not. So we want to figure out what's the best fix again. So if you want to do the same thing, pause the video and see if you think it's A, B, or C, or maybe more than one of these choices are good. And when you come back, I'll share the answer. All right. So if you did pause and you're back, or if you're just listening along, whichever way, that's fine. So A, derived from a word meaning nervous sleep. We have a semicolon here. Hypnotism actually refers to a type of focused attention. Now again, remember I said these are, one is complete, one is incomplete. One is what's called a dependent clause, one is an independent clause. So semicolon doesn't really work. So I would not choose A for this unless both of your clauses are complete. So when we start fixing run-on sentences, you will see a little more use for the semicolon, but for now I wouldn't use it for this. B, derived from a word meaning nervous sleep, comma, hypnotism actually refers to a type of focused attention. Now again, we just take this sort of red part, right? That's a dependent clause, we use a comma, and we connect it to an independent clause. Complete sentence connected to an incomplete sentence with a semicolon, with a comma, can work really well. So B is good. C, hypnotism is derived from a word meaning nervous sleep. Okay, oh, we just added a subject, didn't we? And we added a linking verb, a verb here. That makes this now a complete sentence. And the second one's a complete sentence. So, period, capital H, new subject. This one looks good too. So B and C are good. I wouldn't do. A is not a great improvement, I would say, for this. All right, one more on fragments, and then we're going to look at run-ons. And again, if you're getting the idea of this at any point, you can skip ahead if you're making it this far. I hope you are. Let's look at one more, though, of fragments before we look at how to fix a run-on. So contrary to popular belief, the hypnotic state differs from sleep. So again, we have this very much of a fragment, right? This is obviously not a complete sentence. If somebody just said, contrary to popular belief, and that was totally out of context, you would be, what's contrary to popular belief? I don't know the subject. What doesn't have any meaning, right? So that's a fragment. It's missing something. Again, if you want to pause the video, take a look at A, B, and C and decide which one you think would be the best choice, and then come back. All right, so A, contrary to popular belief, the hypnotic state differs from sleep. So again, we did this thing where we take this incomplete sentence, we use a comma, and we connect it right to a nice complete sentence. So this works. A is good. Contrary to popular belief, semicolon, the hypnotic state. Again, we have a incomplete and a complete, or a dependent and an independent. We're connecting it with a semicolon. Doesn't really work. Semicolon is much better for fixing run-ons, and of this type anyway. The hypnotic state differs from sleep, comma, contrary to popular belief. Well, basically, we just did the same thing, but in a different order. So once again, we use the comma. We have a dependent clause. We have an independent. Perfect. That's a great way to fix a fragment, in my opinion. All right, let's keep going, and let's look at a couple of run-on sentences for examples, and then we'll be finished with grammar for this video. And if you'll bear with me, we're going to look at a little bit on paragraph structure. And once again, as you begin revising your paper, run-ons and fragments, I may even point those out when I grade your paper. So if you do later, notice that you see some run-ons and fragments in your paper, you could potentially go back and look at this video again to help as you correct those errors in your paper. Again, because it's just one of the things that's very common. Don't be discouraged if they do come up in your writing, because everybody seems to do this. It's very normal. All right, so run on example number 1. The diplomats will end their discussion on Friday. They will submit their final decision on Monday. So here we have some people having a discussion, diplomats, high-powered people, and then they're going to submit a report. So we've got two things going on. It's a run-on. There's too much for one sentence. We need some punctuation. So again, take a look at A, B, and C. If you'd like to pause the video and then come back and see which one would be the best answer. I'll let you do that, and if you don't, we just keep going. So A, the diplomats will end their discussion on Friday. They will submit their final decision on Monday. Okay, so we did recognize here that this is a subject complete thought. This has got a subject verb complete thought. That's an independent clause. Second one also has a subject verb complete thought independent clause. And remember, putting a comma is a good start, but it's still what's called a comma splice. So A is not there yet, really, for me. B, diplomats will end their discussion on Friday, period, capital T. So we just turned these two independent clauses that were just stuck together over here in purple. We gave it a capital letter. We put a period. We made two sentences out of it. So that is fine. Remember, correcting a run-on sentence by making it two sentences can work. You probably don't want to do that with every single sentence in your paper because it could be very choppy. But for this one, it works. At least it's grammatically correct. So that's an improvement. C to me is the best choice, but B is good. A is bad, B is good, and C is the best choice in my opinion. So the diplomats will end their discussion on Friday, comma, and then we add what's called a fanboy. Remember, it's the A in fanboy, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And they will submit their final decision on Monday. So we have a comma, we have a conjunction to connect these two ideas together. If you want something really funny that will take you back to my childhood, you can Google conjunction junction. And I don't think this is just something that makes me nostalgic when I see it. There was a thing when I was a kid called Schoolhouse Rock, and I would watch it on Saturday mornings, back when you could only watch cartoons at certain times. You couldn't stream them. And Conjunction Junction is just a grammar video that shows, they had all these different videos. They had videos about how the laws are made. I'm just a bill. You might have seen that one before. At any rate, I'm getting nostalgic, so I'll keep moving here. But Conjunction Junction talks about how conjunctions are used, basically to hook things together, and that's what we're seeing here. So not required for our class, but I'm just kind of joking because it always brings back memories when I even just hear the word conjunction. I think of that old Schoolhouse Rock song, Conjunction Junction. All right. So again, A is not a great way, B is good, and C is even better. Let's look at one more. Our division's reports are posted on our webpage. Hard copies are available by request. So again, it's not a very long sentence. So you might think, oh, isn't a run-on like usually go on and on and on? Not necessarily, because it's just a matter of if it's got two independent clauses, to be clear, you want to punctuate differently. So again, pause the video if you'd like and take a look at A, B, and C and come back and we can talk about which ones are best. So A, our division's reports are posted on our webpage. Hard copies are available by request. Once again, the person recognized, we're fixing this. We recognize, okay, we've got a problem. This is too much information. So we put a comma but again, that's a comma splice. So we wouldn't want to do that really. Our division's reports are posted on our webpage, comma, and hard copies. So then we use a comma and a fanboy, much better. Our division's reports are posted on our webpage, semicolon, hard copies are available by request. This is also good. Remember, the semicolon works good if each one of these different parts of your sentence are complete on their own, which they are. These are called independent clauses. So to connect those with the semicolon is fine. And then or, comma, fanboy is good. I would not do A. That's just a comma splice, which is another type of sentence error. So A is not so good. B and C are both kind of equally fine. Last one, I promise. Some diplomats applauded the treaty, others opposed it vehemently. Now we have what's called a comma splice. This is the same thing we've looked at, right, where you need a little something else. So again, pause the video and see which one you think A, B, and C, and then come back and we'll go over the answers. Or you can just stay there, whichever works. Some diplomats applauded the treaty, comma, but others opposed it vehemently. So again, over here in the purple, we have a comma, but no fanboy. Here we use the B from fanboy, right? F-A-N-B. And but is a conjunction that connects these two ideas together. So comma, but would work here. The semicolon could work just fine because we have two complete ideas, two complete thoughts, two independent clauses. This one does not work because we have a fanboy, but we need a comma. So to make this better, we'd want to say the treaty, comma, yet. That's just missing a comma. All right, we'll skip this one. And let's talk for a little bit now. I'm going to kind of really shift gears, and I won't spend a long time here. But again, like I said, I know I mentioned this is going to be a little bit longer video, so this will make them up to a little bit longer, but hopefully you can stay with it. Maybe you want to pause and have a snack here, I don't know, or do something else and come back to it. But we're going to talk a little bit about developing paragraphs. So either way, if you want to pause and do this part later, it's a whole new topic. So we kind of finished with the sentence structure for now. And again, the sentence structure thing could be useful once you get your first paper back. If you see run-ons and fragments a lot, you may want to go back and take a look at that video again. Or look at our textbook pages on that. So paragraphs are, again, building blocks for everything that we do in writing. And so in the Harbrace book, from about pages 12 to 24, there's a lot of information that I'm going to cover here in a slightly different way on paragraphs. Paragraphs, to me, always have some parts. They may not be exactly in the order I'm going to talk about, but you do probably want in the paragraph somewhere to state what you're talking about. And that can be somewhat indirect, or it can be the very first sentence where you just say, this is what I'm talking about. But usually you do have a topic sentence, and then you have some what are called supporting sentences or supporting details where you explain whatever it is you're doing. Another thing that paragraphs have that to me is important is what's called a method of development. So let's say you're telling a story. Well, that's what I would call a narrative or narration. So there are different rules that you can look at for how to tell a story, and following those can make it really clear for your reader. So it's good to be aware of these different kinds of what I would call methods of development. You can call them patterns if you want to. I just always feel like when I'm writing, especially if I'm writing under time constraints, like I have an assignment due next week and there's a lot of pressure, I like recipes, formulas, paint by numbers kind of things sometimes. And I think a lot of people do appreciate that. So these are like that. So if you're kind of struggling to get an essay put together for a class and you had the freedom, maybe you decide you want to do a comparison essay. If you can choose the topic or a process or a narration, or maybe it's just the one paragraph that you're looking at. That's what we're going to focus on today, is just how you can construct paragraphs in a certain way, how you can build paragraphs in a certain way. And then I'm going to mention something called patterns of organization, which is kind of part of that. All right, so a narrative is a story. It's a series of events. It doesn't always mean like a bedtime story, like once upon a time this happened, but it's just some things happened. I mean, if you looked at a police report, anybody who's in criminal justice, that's narration, a lot of narration often, because you're telling a story about something that happened, right? Usually something bad. But it happens in all kinds of areas, reports. So it's not only like, oh, we're writing a novel when we talk about narration. It's anytime you have a series of events, something happens, and you want to explain that, when it happened, who was involved, etc. We generally use chronological order. Chronological means time. And by the way, the reason I put this, I think this is Hopi or Zuni. It's a Native American storyteller. And all those children clinging to this woman are clinging to her because she's telling stories, right? So storytelling is hardwired, I think, into us in our DNA. We like to hear stories. People have been telling stories, I think, about as long as humans have been using language, maybe even before. There are all these old cave paintings, right, on these caves in France, for example, that show that people have been telling, probably telling stories to each other for longer than we have history. So narration is just keying into that, and using narration in your essay, telling a story, is a good way to pull in your reader, but also to communicate clearly. One of the other things about when you're trying to write strong paragraphs, using transitional phrases as much as you can. These are words that help the reader kind of follow along with you. So in a narrative, you might say, first this happened, later this, then next. You're going to tend to use, not always, but you're going to tend to use transitional words that show time order. So again, this is one way to organize a paragraph. And we're going to look at a couple of examples from some college level textbooks in just a minute to see how this looks in more like college level writing. Description is another way to organize a paragraph or even a whole essay or a paper. And to describe something, I always say, is to paint a picture with words. And so this is a literal painting of a picture done with words. But the idea is you're describing something, you're telling the details about it so someone can visualize it, imagine it, make it come to life. And that's not only true in fiction writing, but you have to do that if you're trying to help somebody understand, even if it's a paper for psychology class or criminal justice or nursing or whatever it might be, you still have to sometimes describe and make something vivid. And one way to do that is use spatial order. If you're doing a physical description, you may use transitional words such as next to, below, right, left, above, etc. And again, all these are just ways that help you make this description come to life. And then comparison contrast, just like you can imagine, comparison contrast writing is when you're looking at the similarities and the differences. So you're out at the grocery store, you pick up the yogurt, and this one is the sugarless or low sugar, and this is the regular one, and you start looking at, oh, what are the calories? What's the nutrition? You're doing comparison contrast, right? Comparison shopping. In writing, we tend to do that in a couple different ways. We may talk about the way that we have these two objects, and they're similar in all these ways, and they're different in all these ways. Or maybe we bounce back and forth. This is one similarity, this is one difference. And that doesn't matter. That's up to you as a writer to sort of figure out the pattern. But as you're doing that, you would probably use transitions such as also, as well, when you're looking at similarities. Similarly, in contrast, nevertheless, however, when you're looking at the differences. So again, just trying to make your comparison contrast clearer by arranging it in a certain way, by focusing on similarities and differences, and then by using transitions. And then finally, a process analysis. Process analysis is usually one of two types, but the main idea with process analysis is you're telling somebody how something works or how to actually do it. So if you're really giving instructions on how to put a chair together or something, that's a how-to. If you're just telling somebody, how does this plant, grow? What makes it grow? That's more of an explanation. You're not going to tell somebody necessarily. Well, you could do a gardening video or paper telling them how to grow plants, but in general, you're talking about like photosynthesis or something, or how light turns into energy and so on. That's more of an explanation. So, but process analysis, we're thinking about where, why, who, what, when, how, and so on. And we'd probably also arrange this in chronological order, especially a how-to. Because if you're giving somebody instructions on how to do something, look at any YouTube video that does this, and they usually start with, this is the first thing you need to do, then the second thing, and so on. All right, so let's look at this paragraph. And again, what you may want to do is pause the video and read this paragraph, and then we can talk about these questions in just a second. So if you want to do that, pause it, and then I'll go over this really quickly, and we'll just look at a couple of examples, and we will be done for today. So again, if you did pause and you came back, here we have paragraph A. What type of paragraph is this? So I would say this is what's called a process analysis. So what we're doing is we have a number of steps can be taken to control eating. This is from from back when I was in college, an old psychology book that I still happen to have, and it's basically telling you how to control eating. And it has number 1, number 2. These are our transitions. They don't have words. They just have numbers. How to control your eating. And then finally, you could look at the transitions, and then the main idea is, it's basically about controlling eating. So let's get 1 or 2 more. Again, if you could pause the video, take a look at this, and then I'll come back and tell you what type it is. That's the main thing we want to look at. I'm just trying to get you guys to identify what these look like in academic writing. So again, pause the video if you want. Come back. Okay, this is from a novel called The Last Picture Show by Larry McMurtry. And what you see here is a description of maybe something like the setting of a small town. So this is a description. One of the ways you know it's a description is because it's giving you details, visual details. There's a car parked on the courthouse square. It's nighttime. It talks about the way the car sounds when it starts and that there's smoke coming out of it. And you sort of just should get this vivid image of like a small town in Texas on a winter morning. All right, so again, if you can pause the video just for a moment, take a look at this picture, and then I'll come back and kind of give you a rundown on this one. This is also from a memoir, not a novel. All right, so if you did take a look at it, you could probably get the idea that this type of paragraph is a narrative. It starts out during Easter time, right? So it's right away, it's telling you about time, almost like once upon a time. And then it talks about some events happen. To prepare ourselves for communion, we were supposed to make a confession. And Sister James appointed a time that week. Here we have another transitional kind of phrase that's talking about time order. For each of us to come to the rectory and be escorted by her to the confessional. She would wait outside until, another time order word, we were finished. And then time order word, she would guide us through our penance. So those are, I have a few more here, but I'm not going to go through all those. But I just wanted to give you the idea of, developing these paragraphs. You have a topic sentence, you have some supporting details, and then we can use these different paragraphs, narration, different patterns, sorry, description, comparison, contrast, and process analysis. All right, so thanks so much if you made it to the end of this video. This was a pretty extensive amount of information here, but let me know if you have any questions. And again, you can find more information about this in our Harbrace book. You could also probably go to, like I mentioned, that website, OWL, the Purdue OWL, if you wanted to learn more, especially about the sentence structure that we covered earlier in the video. So let me know if you have questions by email or coming to office hours, and I hope to see you either there or hear from you by email. And as always, let me know if you have questions. Thanks for watching this.